Hi everyone, welcome back to another video here on Cluiche with myself, Seamus, Brady, Luke, Peyton, and we're joined once again by Matthew Hurley, the Gaelic Statsman, to go in depth into the All-Ireland Football Final of 2023. We're going to look at every single nook and cranny in the All-Ireland Final. Leave no stone unturned. We'll come at it from a serious angle. We'll talk about the serious discussion points, and then we'll have a light-hearted bit of banter about the game itself and everything like that. But first of all, Luke, as a fellow Dub, All Ireland champions 2023, victory there. The scoreline is up 115 to 113. Bit of a sweet victory. Would you argue that this is how far back do you have to go, Luke, to get one as sweet as this one?
Yeah, no, there definitely was a different feel about it. I think you could tell as well with the celebrations that the players viewed it differently as well. Because I don't think you can really remember. Well, it's never happened that Cluxton's been so animated after an All Ireland final. The fact that he was still even on the pitch is like a bit of a miracle, I suppose. And then, I suppose just those levels of jubilation that you remember towards maybe about the six in a row, and there was the COVID ones at the end, was that the full time whistle would go, and it was nearly kind of just let's kind of move over and go for the trophy presentation. There was real jubilation in this one. And I think some people are probably maybe scoff at the 2-year kind of a 2-year drought, which is probably laughable when you think about it like that. But it just seemed like, I don't know, inside Dublin, it just seemed like things weren't really right for those 2 years and something was seriously wrong. And just this year has felt better. I think you can see it as well, is that from the Mayo game onwards, Dublin had 3 capacity crowds. That just wasn't happening in previous years. They weren't selling at the ground. The public weren't buying into it. And for whatever reason this year, whether it was Cluxton coming back, Mannion coming back, McCaffrey, the Dublin crowd did buy back into it this year. And I think, between I've with Seamus, I've talked about this a bit, is that the last 2 years you found yourselves getting a little bit disillusioned with it, because it just was a bit kind of, the style of play wasn't great. The new players coming through weren't really doing it. There was no real excitement around the Dublin football, and they just needed that injection of the older players to come back in. And it's a bit worrying for the future that that they had to rely on these older players, and that question mark of who replaces them is absolutely there. And this thing about people saying that Dublin's golden generation is never going to end, it is going to end pretty soon, I think. And I think the reality is just they're savouring this one, because once the likes of McCarthy's and stuff and Fitzsimons and Cluxton move on, I do think 2 years mightn't be a bad old drought after those fellas start to move on.
Yeah, I do completely agree with what you're saying, and I think it's the type of thing that I think there's two reasons, and I'll throw this over to you, Matthew, and then if you agree with them, and then if you have any other potential ideas as to why the interest maybe wasn't there in 21 and 22. I think 21, it became sort of a predictable affair. 21 was 2020 was such a non-event All Ireland to some level. 2021, everybody kind of thought that they knew what was going to happen before it even began. So why go if there's no sense of jeopardy? Jeopardy is what makes the games amazing. It's no surprise that Dublin Mayo sold out, because everybody thought Mayo might beat Dublin. It's no surprise that this game sold out. Jeopardy is what draws the crowds. Being unknown of what's going to happen is what draws the crowds. But then on top of that, Dublin were playing a boring style of football in 21, and the early parts of 2022 were just trying to hold on to the ball for as long as possible. This year, we attacked teams. You look at the Louth Leinster final, you look at Mayo in the quarterfinal. We went for teams when we had them. And I feel like that's also what drew the crowds back. And the challenge of having to go and win it again, having been knocked off your perch. There's that whole narrative in sports, say for the UFC, for example, when a dominant champion retires, but then comes back to fight the new champion. Those are always the most interesting bouts, and they're always the most interesting. Could the old kings retake the throne? I think that's what helped to create the narrative around this summer.
Yeah, definitely. In fairness, and there was another thing in that as well. I think COVID played a huge factor. You're going to games was a huge thing. Again, I remember 2021, Dublin played their first championship game against Wexford down in Wexford Park. What was the capacity there? About 2,000, something like that. So, that could have been a factor as well. And then you look at the Crow Park games. Even in the Crow Park games, I know Kildare pushed them far that game, and Dublin probably weren't at their best that year. But we always knew going into the games, me and Kildare were not going to put it up really well to Dublin in many ways. There was a sense that Mayo could do it in 2021 because Dublin were going back to the style, and as well as that, Jack McCaffrey was leaving because he was on doctor duties. You look at Stephen Cluiche was leaving, and that was the main thing with Dublin. And you look at even the league games this year, like the game against Clare in the league, I don't think many was at that. To be honest with you, like maybe Clare fans didn't travel. Dublin weren't playing to their potential either. You look at the Derry games, the league game, the league final, even the Kildare game. Like I was looking back at old games, doing stats on games, in the lead up to the Ireland final, and even the Kildare game, the semi final. I know Kildare were 2 points within it, but that stadium in Croke Park was absolutely empty nearly. The Loud game was very, very bad as well, very bad attended. And actually, the Mayo game, I sensed the crowd was absolutely hopping. The Dublin crowd actually believed in their team. Even the Mayo crowd in general believed in it. And as Colin Basquet's goals actually went in those games, you could hear a roar on Croke Park that day. Like I was there, like Cork playing beforehand against Derry, and there was kind of a belief in Dublin fans that the old Dublin was coming back into fruition. Even the Monaghan game, Dublin started to play a good style, and as well as that, Monaghan were kind of a novel semi-finalist as well. And this final in general, it was such a tough look to get tickets. Like, there was all sorts of stories on social media on how it was tough to get tickets. One fella, his ticket actually got scanned. Then he went to a pub and a Kerry guy actually gave him the ticket. That was such a funny story there. The other final. But I probably won't go into the full details of it because you don't want to turn the crowd away or whatever. But
that one.
that was such a weird story, right? But yeah, like the Dublin crowd, they definitely got behind their team. The Mayo game, and I agree with you, Luke, completely. The Mayo game was where Dublin's season turned. Like even I look back to the Roscommon game, and I remember Aaron being to that game, and like he was, I quote his words on the hill that day at halftime against Roscommon, effing shocking, man. Yeah. That was at halftime in the Roscommon game, and Dublin has come a long way since then. Even the Kildare game in Nolan Park, like Kildare got a few scores, and Dublin were kind of frightened that they were going to lose in that game. Sligo was a bit of a non-event, but that Mayo game, before going into it, myself, Aaron, I don't know about yourself or Luke or Seamus, I don't know what you thought of that game, but me and Aaron thought Mayo were going to beat Dublin because Dublin weren't performing to their utmost that season, whereas Mayo were coming in with a bit of confidence, beating Galway. I know they lost to Cork, but Mayo, after winning the league, after doing well against Kerry, let's not forget, we thought Mayo would win that game. They didn't win that game. Dublin produced a very good performance. And that second half performance in particular, like it was something out of the blue from Dublin in general. Like I think Mayo only scored 3 points in that second half. And that was a turning point in that season for Dublin. And that was what drove them on to victory yesterday. And they were a much better team against Kerry. No refereeing decisions or anything could take away from Dublin. They were absolutely the better team and deserved to win on the day. But I think the season turned in that day at the start of July against Mayo, because Dublin played free, open, expansive football in that second half in particular.
Yeah, no, like there's no other way to describe it. It was just an awesome second half performance, and like at halftime as well in that game against Mayo, there was a sense that Mayo actually kind of had Dublin a little bit, and then Dublin's come out in the second half and just blow them away the way they did. It was just awesome, and I was the same. Like I remember being I was at the Roscommon game. I remember just at full time walking out and being like, what was that? And it's a really frustrating. It was a really frustrating day because when you were being honest, Luke, watching that game, everyone was coming out in the immediate aftermath saying, God, weren't Roscommon good? No, they weren't. Roscommon should have beaten Dublin. Like that game was there for Roscommon that day, and they left it behind them. It was a tricky one. It was just like, if you were to say back then that like Dublin were going to win the All-Ireland, beating Kerry, like you wouldn't really have been too confident. Not that you would have thought that's impossible, but it was hard at that moment to see how Dublin were going to turn it around.
Yeah, look, and that's the thing is that, like, you'd be lying if you said that you were confident with Dublin and you were happy with where they were going. Because earlier in the start of the league, if you cast your eye far back to the league when there was the Clare game, when it looked like Clare were going to beat Dublin quite handy.
Brian Hurley shot off the crossbar as well.
I can
Like,
actively remember during those games that if you'd go on Twitter and you check the Dublin, if you can still go back and scroll all the way back to the Dublin tweets in that Clare League game, all the comments are Desi Farrell out, and it's there was a lot of stuff in the league of people saying that we're very, very unhappy about kind of where Dublin were going earlier on this year. And then the Roscommon game, I think it was much the same. And just from there, look, he gets an awful lot of stick, Desi, and like I've questioned a good few things he did. I hated the style that they played with the last 2 years, and that was the bit that I really disliked. But you have to give him credit, I suppose, with this year and how I suppose he got Gilroy in, he got the players back as well. And you can say as well that, look, they didn't look good for the first half of the year, I think, Dublin, but did they time the run really, really well? I don't know. Is this just a cliche for teams kind of, if it's true? I think I saw an interview with Desi earlier where they said that they did trust their gut on how to time the team right for the year. And look, they seem to have really, really done that. So like, I think a lot of people were questioning Dublin earlier on the year, but they were probably really going through the paces earlier on the year. And like, the fact is, like, the football calendar, if you compare it to the hurling calendar, it's a very long season. And like, for Dublin, they know that the league doesn't really matter for them as well. They didn't really care about being relegated. Provincials, they know it doesn't really matter how they'll play. They'll probably win that anyway. And then this new group format too, like, it would take 3 losses for Dublin to have been knocked out of that essentially. And like, realistically, that was never going to happen. So I think Desi kind of knew that they only had to peak for that quarterfinal against Mayo. And Jesus, like, that was, like Matthew was saying, like, that's the best I've seen Dublin play probably since that 2019 All-Ireland final against Kerry in the replay, I'd say.
oh yeah, no, that was a throwback to vintage Dublin at stages in that game, particularly after Small's goal. I'd not heard Croke Park like that in a long, long time from a Dublin point of view. I'd not heard the Dublin fans that behind a Dublin team since pre-COVID days, at the very least anyway. But yeah, let's go through the game itself, moment by moment, talking point by talking point. Start of the game, Matthew, very cagey, I think it's fair to say, for the first 20 minutes anyway. Both teams very much, in the sense that if it was a boxing match, it would be a decision. Both teams are very standoffish, watching what each other is doing. Dublin sat very deep and tended to hit on the counter-attack. That yielded 2 brilliant scores from Paul Mannion. Dublin were ahead 6 points to 4. And then, of course, Paul Gainey's goal just before half-time. Now, we were talking about this off air. What a pass by David Clifford. You can't do but just hold your hands up. And Gainey, having initially looked like he might have messed it up, still stuck it away for the first goal ever scored on Cluxton since Killian Spillan's goal in 2019.
Yeah, and it was a crucial goal for Kerry at that point, because I thought before that moment, I thought, Dublin, you have him. Dublin had Kerry without a doubt. Like, Stephen Cluxton did absolutely excellent, rolling back the years. He didn't score a point up until then.
Two frees.
Two frees, or one was a 45, or I don't know which one it was, but it was incredible, really, the way he strutted up, picked it over the bar, almost like the Cluxton of old. Brilliant performance in the first half from him in particular. And Paul Mannion, what can I say about this guy? He's definitely been a clutch. We talk about Costello being a clutch player, Pascal being a clutch player. You look at Mannion's form as well. Superb. I think he took about, 7 shots yesterday, converted 5 in pressure situations. He was incredible yesterday, and he definitely drove Dublin to victory. And it looked like Dublin had the nose of Kerry, they had the turnover, they had the midfield battle won. Like, Cluxton won Dublin won every one of their kickouts yesterday, which actually epitomises how ahead of Kerry's midfield Dublin actually were. But then the sucker punch. Paul Gainey gets that goal. It's a brilliant pass by David Clifford, brilliant passage of play in general. But 2 questions I'd ask. First of all, the Dublin defence. David Clifford's an unbelievable player, but why is he down? It almost reminded me of, remember Limerick and Cork in 2018 with Jamie Callahan let Pat Ryan in from the corner, and he just strode into the back of the net. It was almost like that. And the question, how did David Clifford actually get out of that corner and get over there? It was incredible, really. The second point, I don't know what you think it is. It doesn't matter this day, but at that point it did. Was it a double hop from Paul Gainey?
Not
it's a question.
Yeah,
Looked weird.
Yeah.
Looked weird, but no. And I think the first thing we need to look at is David Byrne let him go. David Byrne let him get the initial burst on him, and that's where Gainey got the goal. Like he finished it well, but I think that moment where David Byrne let him get the initial sprint, I think that's where the crucial moment happened.
Probably
Yeah.
did, yeah. But I'm going to ask you, why don't you think it was a double hop?
Well, look, I'd hop in here is that, like, I think you can physically see the motion where Gainey goes to hop it the second time. I think you can see that he realizes that he's about to hop it again the second time, and by not coming back into his hands, I think that's fine. And like, it's one of these gray areas in the rule book, but I think common sense has to prevail a little bit, that he takes a hop and he goes to take a second hop, but it never comes back into his hands. But before, well, it does come back to his hands, but before it comes back into his hands, it hits his foot and he kicks it back into his hands. So look, as a Dublin fan, I had zero complaints about that at all. I thought Cluxton actually did very well, because Cluxton nearly forced them into an overcarry there, into a technical foul, I suppose, just by the pressure of coming out on top of him as well. And he nearly got him, bar Gainey, kind of with his quick thinking, I suppose. And then he finished it really well. So like, I'd have a bit of sympathy for Byrne as well, a little bit, kind of a one-on-one in that sort of position, straight in front of the posts. It's a tricky old spot. I thought Gainey's movement really, really good. He lost him really, really well too. And then, look, the pass was then right on him, I suppose. But I thought Gainey's movement was really good. The skill as well to flick it back up, considering the pressure Cluxton put on him, and then to finish it afterwards as well. I thought Gainey rolled back the years a bit in the first half. I thought he caused all sorts of problems. His work rate was really, really good. And yeah, look, I just thought it was a really, really well taken goal. And I was kind of surprised people were questioning it at halftime a little bit, because to be honest, I didn't really see any issue with it. And then when it was the major talking point at halftime, I was a bit surprised. But
me too, yeah. And I want to throw one back to you, Luke. This is an apology 2 years in the making, but Stephen Cluxton, after the Mayo semi-final in 2021, when the whole incident happened at the end of the game, where the Dublin team were losing their minds and starting to get into scuffles with Mayo players and like losing their temper to a degree. And I remember in the video after, you basically said that if Cluxton was there, we wouldn't have seen that happen from Dublin, or if people like him were there, we wouldn't have seen that happen. And I made the point to respond to you at the time saying, well, look, James McCarthy is responsible for what James McCarthy does, and Cluxton or no Cluxton, he still would have done it. But there was one moment which it wouldn't have been seen on the highlights, but there was one moment where it was the bit where David Clifford had initially been given the free, and then like Fitzsimons was going nuts saying that he dragged me and everything. And Brian Howard was about to get into it with David Clifford, and the two of them were shoving each other off the ball, and Howard was really going for it, and Cluxton just whips out of the goal, straight over to Howard, drags him away, completely de-escalated the situation. And I was thinking, in that moment, that was like, you could see Cluxton's influence. The minute he said to Howard, no, get over there, Howard was like, okay, and walked off. That influence. So, look, maybe it still will happen against Mayo, but his influence in that game, particularly over Dublin's mentality, was as clear as day, because every kick out, as Matthew said, every kick out was perfect. His frees were perfect. He was so professional in how he handled himself, and he didn't let anybody else drop their standard either.
Yeah, no, and I've kind of ran out of words as well as that. And I know there was a bit of a debate online, is that, like, I know going into the game, everybody was saying Shane Ryan would be the All-Star goalkeeper. And I'm sure, I don't know, I haven't seen either of your teams on the All-Stars yet, but like for me, it has to be Cluxton for me. Is that, like, when you look at that final performance, like, I don't think he can do any more in that final. The two frees, like, we haven't seen Cluxton kick a free like that since 2015. And then at the age of 42, he steps up, doesn't even pause as well. He takes the few steps back, immediately goes forward, turns around, no fuss at all. Every single kick out is gone as well. A few of them were tricky kickouts too as well, that he hit Howard right out in the wing every single time, right into the breadbasket. Like, and it was just a phenomenal thing as well. And you talk about like the discipline thing, it definitely is a factor. I do think the players are slightly terrified of him. And I do think that he does have this presence that the players are, that there's the younger fellas are probably like, geez, and like he is an intimidating presence, and that he's man a few words, and that, like, from what you hear is that people, like, they want to impress him. Like, he's not a fella that's gonna roar at you or anything like that as well, and he's not gonna lay into you, but people want to impress him, and he is this kind of intimidating figure, I suppose. And he just kind of, I think him being there has really driven standards. You talk about Gilroy's kind of a similar type presence as well. And they just kind of, Dublin got this.
Boy of the year.
Yeah, Dublin got this kind of no nonsense fact that they didn't want to. Dublin don't want to be returning to this. Like you see all the stuff as well, the mid 2000s when they're linking arms, running down to the hill and stuff, and doing the pillar caffrey warm up down with Mayo and stuff. Dublin need to get away from all that. That's the reason why Dublin went from 95 to 2011 without an All Ireland, because of all this, like all this show up shite. Like, so, like, I don't know. I think that's why in that Mayo game, that was the first time I felt in 2021 that I felt that was kind of coming back, and it was this like, oh, like we'll just throw our toys out the pram. And then this year it was more controlled, the work rate was better, they were more cohesive as a team, and there wasn't any of this kind of I don't know, mano kind of bullshit going on and stuff as well. And it was just like it was more what we've come to expect the last couple of years, and it was a bit more of a return to standards. And I think the challenge now is that, I think McCaffrey said it in his interview afterwards, is that he felt his role coming back this year was more to ensure that the standards are kind of maintained for when the baton is passed on as well. And I think a lot of the players probably look at what they did and they want that to kind of keep continuing after they're gone, because it did look a little bit for the last 2 years that once the players that were driving the standards left, that the standards just completely went out the window. So look, hopefully they've learned from that, and when they do move on again, that they adapt better to it than they did the last time.
Yeah, for sure. And so halftime came, Kerry went in 1 point ahead. Definitely felt like a bit of a knockout blow when the Gainey goal went in just before halftime. I was low-key thinking as well, though, halftime probably came at the right time for Dublin. Didn't let Kerry, get any couple more scores on the board. So at the start of the second half, Kerry looked like they were starting to move clear. They went 3 points clear. And then in the 46th minute, Colin Basquel out of nowhere turns over Gavin White, set up Paddy Small, and he finished to the back of the net. Paul Murphy's diving block only succeeding to divert the ball into the top corner. Matthew, at the moment that this went in, so Kerry had been 3 points ahead. They'd been 1-8 to 8 points up. At the moment that Paddy Small's goal went in, Dublin levelled the game, but Kerry still then hit the next point, 2 points, went 3 points ahead again. So twice in the second half, they were 3 points clear, and yet didn't finish the game out.
It's down to Dublin's calmness, and I actually go back to Luke's point about Stephen Cluxon, and I want to apologise for James Barrell on this channel, because I said at the time when Cluxon came back and he started against Kildare, it's a disrespect to David O'Hanlon. And I was thinking he had a brilliant performance down in Park Keeve against Cork, where without David O'Hanlon, Dublin wouldn't have been promoted. So it's important to remember that as well. But Cluxon just adds that steel, he adds that desire, he adds that calmness, as Luke said, and as you said, Seamus, as well, with the Brian Howard incident. I actually didn't watch that back, but that's Cluxon all over. Just dragging him back, doing the right things at the right time. And he's just a brilliant leader around the pitch to have as well. And he would have been my man of the match yesterday. But onto Paddy Small's goal, like it was well robbed by Colin Basquel. And Maurice Brosnan actually made a very good point from the Examiner. He's a very good journalist, and use my stats a lot in fairness, but follow him if you haven't already. He made the point. Colin Basquel was the top scorer for play this year, 5-17. But the score he contributed, the most important score he contributed, he didn't score. He robbed Gavin that ball, and eventually goes to Paddy Small. Lucky deflection off Paul Murphy. And I think if Paul Murphy didn't get his hands in, hindsight's a beautiful thing. If Paul Murphy didn't get his hands in front of it, Shane Ryan's saving it. But Dublin, they had that bit of luck, and to be honest, they deserved it because they played better than Kerry at that point. But Kerry, they came back into the game. Paddy Clifford kicks some outstanding points. But then, for Dublin to stand up and say, we're not losing today, we're going to go first. We're like Paul Mannion did that second half, and Brian Fenton. The man is an absolute colossal figure. I think Brian Fenton came for this season in general, from the quarterfinal stage onwards against Mayo. That second half performance for Mayo was absolutely superb. Second half against Monaghan, brilliant. The second half yesterday, magical. He's just an incredible footballer. Brian Howard sweeping up in front, brilliant performance by him as well. And even the lads at the back, Lee Gannon, I know he didn't have his best day, but still contributed a small bit. Paddy Small, brilliant performance. Dean Rock even coming on and getting that winning free. He was called upon to do that, got it. You know, Dublin, they just have the players at these particular moments to provide clutch moments at these times. And to be, you know, to do things that wouldn't suit themselves, but suit the team. Case in point, Cormac Costello yesterday. Look, he was in form, 100% sharp in the last 2 games. He was on a road for an All-Star or Sunday Game Team of the Year member. But yesterday, he sacrificed his performances, his brilliant performances for the team by going to and from back with Thomas Sullivan. And you know that it pays some points to Dublin, absolutely. And I know he didn't get picked for RT Team of the Year, and I think that was the wrong decision ultimately. But that selfless act epitomises what Dublin are as a team. Colin Basket robbing that ball from Gavin White as well. Paddy Small, excellent performance. Brian Fenton, Cluxton, as you said. They're just selfless players. You have players and teams that just go for the glory themselves and don't think about the others around them. But you look at Dublin, they're playing for each other. Jack McCaffrey playing for each other. James McCarthy playing for the badge. And that's the difference really between Dublin, an elite team like Dublin, and the rest of the country. Because they have a team mentality, thinking, I'll die out that pitch for you. Whereas other teams would be saying, I'm going to do it for myself. I'm going to be top scorer and things like that. Whereas Dublin think about the team. And I think that separates the great from the good.
Yeah, very well said. Luke, so Matthew obviously mentioned as well about McCaffrey coming on. Obviously, Dublin got other influence as well from the likes of Niall Scully. One of the big things that I said at the start of the game, and in all my pre-match talk, was I said, if Stephen O'Brien starts, that's a mistake from Kerry. Because he came on against Derry and changed the game. Like he did. He changed the game because he was able to run and break the line. And I was saying, if Stephen O'Brien starts, now the only person that I fear on that Kerry bench was Killian Spillane. And look, the big shout out to Spillane. He came on, he scored a point. He always does for Kerry. But do you think they would have been better off having O'Brien on the bench?
Yeah, look, I think that kind of is the analysis, is that like it's probably aged the way it's aged. Like say if I thought O'Brien played well. I did think O'Brien played well. I thought he caused problems. I thought he rammed the ball well. He wasn't helped by the surface. The fact it was a slippery surface, he spilled a little bit of ball that he would have probably normally kept. But like say if he kicks 2 points, then it's a masterstroke as well. Like going into the game, I thought he was too good to not start. And so I completely understand the call. Like in hindsight, it's probably the wrong call. I don't think Adrian Spillane really offers a whole lot. Maybe what he could have offered.
I would have been saying start Spillane for his midfield presence.
Yeah,
and bring in O'Brien as a Dublin defence tires. Bring in O'Brien when McCaffrey comes on.
That's the thing, is that you could have done that, and like maybe, but at the same time, Kerry showed they didn't need more defensive cover, because like they kept Dublin the first half to 5 points. Like they didn't need the defensive cover. They got the matchups really, really good. I thought Morley was brilliant. I think there's a special mention has to go to him. I think he has to be an all-star. I think he's been really, really good all year. And you can't even say about Morley now as well that he's always just a sitting centre half back as well. He went and marked arguably like one of the top 2 inside forwards in the country, and he kept them scoreless as well. So you can't say that Morley's just a sweeper anyway too. You look at as well, Thomas Sullivan and Costello, like he won that battle as well. I think Graham O'Sullivan on Kilkenny, that was pretty like even as well. Kilkenny didn't have a huge impact on the game as well that he could have had. I thought Kerry done well with the matchups, and it's just that like, yeah, I think maybe that call might have went against them, but then at the same time, I think they had the chances maybe towards the end to get there. They didn't get there in the end. And look, I think as well, when you're in a position where you only have maybe 2 impact players to come off the bench, if O'Brien and Spillane are your only 2 impact players, then you're in a bit of trouble. You needed to unearth a few more as well. Tony Brosnan was a big loss as well. If they had him, then they have another impact player to come in and a bit more energy. But like, I think if you look at Kerry, you could say maybe 17 elite players, but beyond that, like, have they got a whole lot else? I don't even think just to add as well, I don't think Dublin's bench is anywhere near what it was as well when you look at the players coming on too. But look, I suppose Dublin just got that tiny bit more out of it, and I suppose Dublin's I suppose Dublin's experienced players got them over the line. I don't think either bench really, other than Jack McCaffrey, had any real impact on the game, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Sean Bugler was a big loss from Dublin's bench. I think he would have made a huge impact if he was available to come on. And had a little laugh while you were saying that Tyg Morley has to be an all-star, because neither me or Matthew have Tyg Morley in our team of the year. So,
in my opinion, yeah. I wouldn't have had before yesterday, though. I would have had
yeah,
McKinless.
me and Matthew both went with McKinless.
Because it's tough on McKinless, but I just thought that was like
it was a hell of a performance.
Yesterday just blew me away, and I kind of was looking at it, and I had McKinless in my team, and then I was kind of going, geez, I've no Morley in here, and I was kind of thinking about where could I put him in, and like, would you drop Conor McCarthy? Do you drop James McCarthy? You can't drop James McCarthy. I was thinking about dropping, but then I was saying I want to have an actual number 6 in there as well. So then it just comes down to as well. It's tough for McKinless, but I just thought doing it in the All-Ireland final on Con and not even sweeping, I just found it very difficult to leave him out. I thought he was just brilliant.
Yeah, no, he definitely was. And Matthew, so we're now in the final furlong. So Kerry went to 3 points ahead. You were mentioning about Dublin's calmness. They worked it back, got the game level again at 111 each, hit their own 3 points in a row. Then Brian Fenton put them ahead 112 to 111. Kerry equalised from Killian Spillane. Dublin went ahead again. A soft free, let's be honest, for Kerry, levelled the game up. Sean O'Shea slotted that over. Then going into the final few moments, Paul Mannion fired over his 5th point to put Dublin 1 ahead. And then the next play saw Dublin turn over Kerry, win a free for a foul on Colin Pascal, which Dean Rock slotted over the bar. Game over, Dublin winning the All-Ireland. Now, one thing that was key, and this was a fantastic point that our good friend Aaron made over at Gaelic Games Fan TV. Do make sure you follow him if you don't. He made a great point in his reaction to the game, and he was saying, I'm basically paraphrasing what he said, but the point that he made was David Clifford didn't have his greatest game for Kerry. That's a fact. He didn't. Nobody else stood up for Kerry. And we were making the point throughout the year that Pascal was great against Mayo. He wasn't great against Monaghan. Costello stood up. Costello wasn't that great going forward in this game. Paul Mannion stood up. The one game David Clifford doesn't stand up, no one else does. Paddy Clifford got a couple of points, but apart from that, there was no man carrying them on his back the way that David usually does. And that's what cost him, because they were turning to David Clifford to say, help, save us again. And he just wasn't at it this time. And I do think for anybody who's going for him and trying to give him some abuse, it's ridiculous, in my opinion.
Just to jump in there just really quickly, I think it's a little bit harsh on Gainey, and I think it's a little bit harsh on Clifford though. Paddy, I thought the two of them were really,
two of them were really good, but other players in the Kerry team were very quiet.
Yeah.
Like
if you
Sean O'Shea was quiet in the second half.
If you look outside of full forwards and Sean O'Shea, the centre half forward, nobody else in the Kerry team scored, which is the issue. When you look at Dublin, Cluxton scores, Howard scores, Fenton scores, there's Paddy Small scores from wing forward, and there's, I suppose, and you get an impact off the bench as well. Rock comes on and scores, but there was no variety outside of Kerry's full forward line. But I thought the two other lads, I thought Paddy Clifford and Paul Gainey arguably had their 2 best games of the entire season, though, I thought as well. I thought Gainey in particular, I thought that was the best I'd seen him in a long, long time. I do
think you're right to a point, but like Gainey scored, I think, what was it? Gainey got 1-1 or 1-2? 1-1. Yeah, he got 1-1. But like Gainey is now at the stage of his career where he's good for about 50 minutes. Like, as in he has 40, 45, 50 minutes in the tank. He gave what he could, and he deserves the utmost credit for it. And you can't underestimate him. He is a silver fox now, as in, like, he's been around the block. He knows how to, lose people, as he did for the goal. But my point is, as well, is Paddy Clifford was magnificent in the second half at stages. And really, not even at stages. He was magnificent in the second half and really carried the fight and kicked over some crucial scores. But the point is that Dublin had Pascal, Mannion, all these lads, Fenton, stepping up with huge scores at huge moments, Paddy Small as well. Whereas when Kerry were getting down to the last 5 minutes, they were looking to David Clifford every time.
Yeah. And that's the point. But what I said earlier on the season, and I got a bit of flack, usually from Kerry fans, to be honest, but I got a bit of flack because of this comment. I said, without David Clifford and possibly Sean O'Shea, Kerry are bang average. And I definitely stick to that point, because when you look at the games through the season, through the championship in general, right? The Mayo game, the games that matter now, I'm not counting Clare, Tipperary, Loud, okay, that can go out the window. Mayo, David Clifford performs, fair enough, but they still lose the game by 5 points. Cork, they need David Clifford to save him, and Kerry won against the Division 2 team by 2 points. Cork have improved this season, but it was a Division 2 team after all. Again, okay, Tyrone, but I will say, and I said it on your live stream, Seamus, Tyrone threw in the towel, they imploded. And I don't think Tyrone were that good that day. I thought Kerry, okay, they played well enough, but Tyrone were absolutely terrible that day in Croke Park. Against Derry, David Clifford saved them. Sean O'Shea did in the second half. Possibly Stephen O'Brien towards the end, maybe so, I'll grant him that. But against Dublin, and he mentioned it both, the amount of scores that Kerry had isn't enough for an All-Ireland final. It simply isn't. And those people that are actually saying that David Clifford is a disgrace and stuff like that, he had 5 wides and things like that, 8 shots, 5, whatever stat you put it that way. I'll put it to this way with Kerry fans. Kerry would not be anywhere near the All-Ireland final without David Clifford.
Yeah.
And that's a fact. That is an absolute fact.
But that's the other thing as well. Like, I've no respect for any GA fan who gives shit to GA players, like online or like after a game like that. What, you think he went out and deliberately didn't try? Or like, he tried his heart out. It just didn't fall for him on the day. People saying, "Oh, he's a bottler." He did everything but finish correctly. He got away from Mick Fitzsimons, which is a very hard thing to do. He trusted his gut, pulled the trigger, and it was just wide. That just happens sometimes. Name me one footballer down through the years that hasn't had an off day. Dublin 2021, when we got knocked out by Mayo, they were all terrible that day. Fenton, McCarthy, they all had like the worst day I've ever seen them have. And they were getting all sorts of abuse after that game. Flack in the media and everything. And it's just like, I've no respect for a fan that gives abuse to players, because it's like they're doing it for their county. They're putting their bodies on the line, literally putting their bodies' health on the line. They're putting everything they have into it. They're not paid. And David Clifford is giving his absolute all to Kerry. And you see him even, and another thing as well, it's in the year where he's lost his mother, like he's lost his mum a month ago. Like, he went out there, he gave it his all. He seems like a really, really nice fella as well. Like, he seems like, for someone who could be so up his own arse if he wanted to be, he seems like such a lovely bloke. And yeah, for anybody who's given him any sort of abuse, particularly Kerry fans, with no respect for that.
2 things I will say on that. Number 1, calling him a bottler. What about last year against Galway?
What about last year against Galway? Yeah.
Superb.
And he was brilliant against Dublin in the semi-final last year too.
Exactly. So he's not a bottler. He just had an off day. Everybody has an off day. And there's the saying, and I'll keep saying this for every single sport or everything that you, whether you're a carpenter or an engineer, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And actually, somebody actually said, I'm not sure which newspaper it said, but it was Rodney or group chats or whatnot, that the saying is nobody's perfect, but the point is David is nobody. That didn't help either. Before the All-Ireland final. That's just, who actually comes up with that? Game, an All-Ireland final. Who comes up with those captions, and
that's it. Like, is that, did you see him in the post-match?
In the parade, I was going to say, was the parade.
Post-match parade where he was basically saying, we're going to put right our wrongs. You can see it's taking a toll on him already.
You can see
he's
that.
He's literally bowing his head in the thing. He's looking at the ground. He has the microphone like this. He's looking at the ground and he's like, we're going to put right our wrongs. You can see it's taking a toll on him. Like, what is that?
In the parade before the match, he looks like a fella that was carrying a lot of expectation. That was the thing, was that you look around, you could see some of the dubs. You look at League animals were going around and smiling and laughing the whole way around, and you could kind of see the contrast that Clifford he looked like
lads, he's 24 years old.
He looks
he's 2 years older than us.
He's only a few months older than me. He's only about 3 months older than me. But geez, no, he did look like a fella that was carrying a lot of expectation going into it as well. And it doesn't help all this kind of bullshit like that. Apparently Kerry people won't say he's the greatest until he beats Dublin in a final. People are just making up stuff at this stage. Like, it means absolutely nothing. It doesn't matter what final you win. If finals are there to be won, and you know what, like all this sort of stuff, it's almost like people love to do. And even you talk about the Sunday game last night, the likes of Joanne Cantwell saying to the Dublin players in the hotel afterwards, saying like, how did you prepare to face the greatest footballer of all time? Like, can we just ease off a little bit when he's 24 years of age? Just let him have his career first, and then we can maybe discuss it. But like, I don't know. I think look, when it comes to talent, like I'll say he's the most talented player I've ever seen. But like, I don't know, can we cool it a little bit and just let him have his career
clear
first?
to see. Like, the fella isn't on social media.
Yeah.
Like, it's quite clear that he just wants to play his football and just kind of get on with his life. Like, he doesn't really want... Like, let's be honest, lads. You look at, like, for example, Jason Sherlock when he had his career, and all of a sudden he was popping up left, right, and centre. This is in 1995, by the way. Sherlock was popping up in every advert that you'd see on the telly and in the newspapers back in the day. David Clifford could be everywhere if he wanted to be. You don't think he would be picked up by the likes of Lifestyle Sports or like? Of course he would. He is keeping it relatively quiet on social media. He doesn't really want to be on it, and I don't blame him. When you look at how flaky fans are, that if those shots, here's the other thing as well. He could do everything exactly the same. Lose Fitzsimons the same way. Get the shot off the same way. If that goes over the bar. If those shots go over the bar. Number one, Kerry win the All-Ireland if those shots go over the bar. So they're not a million miles off. Everyone coming out immediately and saying, oh, Kerry did this wrong, this wrong. Look, it was just the shots that went wide that cost him the game when you get down to it. But then the second thing as well is we'd be hearing the whole, oh, he's the greatest of all time. And there'd be no calling him a bottler or nothing like that. He was an inch away. Do I think Kerry will eventually beat this Dublin team in the final? Yes. I think it's only a matter of time. As you said, Luke, the Dublin lads are getting older. Fitzsimons, Cluxton and McCarthy will probably all be gone in the next 2 years. And then you've got other lads who are nearing the door as well. Dean Rock, he's definitely going to be gone in the next couple of years. Like, there's so many other lads that are going to be walking out the door.
Yeah,
Kerry will get them.
Long left as well. The two of them, I think, will be. I wouldn't be shocked if the two of them kind of came back for a 1 year type deal as well, because like that. There's a kind of bit of a vibe about this is that they were all in for this one, and like I think the vibe with Dublin is that like they might maybe get their leg kind of twisted to go 1 more year, but like I think if they do, that will be it. It will be just 1 more year. So like. Look, that's saying Kerry aren't far off as well. And I think there is a lot of analysis of it. Defensively, I thought they were brilliant. I thought really, really good. I thought both teams were really, really good defensively. I thought that like they both done enough defensively. They wouldn't have to worry too much about that aspect as well. I just think Dublin had more scorers than Kerry. And like, I think it came down to that. And Dublin looks like the scores are coming easier to Dublin. And when you think about it, I'm sure, Matthew, you probably have stats on this as well, but from watching it, Dublin in the third quarter, I thought in particular, they just seemed to a lot of scoreable chances that they either took wrong options or just some quite poor wides, I thought. And I don't know, is that reflected in the stats, but I just thought that Dublin had an awful lot of opportunities in the final third that they really kind of squandered, whether it be terrible turnovers in that situation or that they just kind of they hit uncharacteristic wides as well, that I just felt that, like I think that Dublin were kind of working that a little bit easier, whereas Kerry were trying to pigeonhole it a little bit, that get Paddy Clifford on his left or get David Clifford, or hope that Sean O'Shea kicks a long range free.
The thing is, actually, I'm looking at I don't have the third quarter in general now, but I have the second half. Dublin had 30 shots overall. They had 16 shots in the second half. They converted 10 out of 16.
It's not terrible. Yeah, it's not terrible. It's not bad at all. Yeah. That's, the
other thing as well, lads, is that when Kerry went 111 to 1-8 up, Dublin outscored them 7 points to 2 for the remainder of the game.
Yeah. That was crucial.
That's not bad from Dublin in the end. And look, the other thing as well that we have to look at is Look, we were talking about David Clifford's performance. He didn't have his greatest game. Obviously, we all completely disagree with, anyone who's calling him a bottle or anything. Look, that was just an off day. And no doubt in my mind, he will be part of a Kerry team that will be victorious in an All-Ireland final again, no doubt about it. And for anybody who's calling him a bottler, again, as Matthew said, look at his performance in the All-Ireland final last year against Galway. Look at his performance in the All-Ireland semi-final against Derry. That is a captain and a leader and a warrior, and he deserves nothing but respect. And as I agree with Luke, he's the most talented footballer I've ever seen. Now, on top of that, another factor in it was how good Mick Fitzsimons was. And like, Matthew, I'll throw this to you. Like, for a guy who's been in the Dublin team since 2010, it goes completely under the radar. He is a quiet fella. Like, he's one of Dublin's greatest ever servants, and 9 All-Ireland medals. Immortal now.
It is, yeah. He did absolutely incredible on Clifford now yesterday. He was handed the toughest task in football really nowadays, or maybe even in history. He's 35 years of age. And my fear with Mick Fitzsimons during the week when previewing this game with Aaron and on my own podcast was, is Mick Fitzsimons too old for this? Because he's 35 years of age. He doesn't have the speed, but what he does have is the know-how. The know-how to get in the position, to read danger. But then again, I knew Fitzsimons had that in spades before even going into the final. But Chris McKay at the same struggled battling Clifford. There was times when he was slipping over in this one, and we were talking about Chris McKay being one of the best defenders in the country. And Clifford didn't look after it. So that was the fear with Mick Fitzsimons in general going to the final. But he did absolutely outstanding. 3 points for Clifford off there. I think 2 from play. The guy had an absolutely colossal performance, and as well as that, he was up for it. He was well up for it, and even the small thing about he seemed to have given away the free for Clifford. I know you said that Brian Howard was going to go to David Clifford and give him one instead of Cluxon. But what I found interesting with Fitzsimons, he was livid with the decision. I don't think Dublin players would have been livid with the decision, say, last year. There was something different.
But then it was on top of that, it was like Fitzsimons is such a cool, calm fella that when he was losing his mind about that decision, I was thinking, all right, the ref's got it wrong here. Mick Fitz doesn't lose his mind like that if he's not genuinely convinced that the wrong decision has been made.
But there was something definitely different about yesterday, though. I don't know if you saw the clip beforehand of him and Costello nearly met off each other in the warm-up beforehand. That like I've never seen Fitzsimons that animated before, and I don't know what Costello was doing, kind of giving him whiplash in the warm-up. But anyway, he didn't appreciate it at all, and he kind of starts. You can see him chasing after him, kind of Happy Gilmore style. Anyway, that he's running after him. But it was just weird, kind of, to see that in the Dublin thing as well. But I think, I think the thing that people are saying is, oh yeah, Clifford got all those shots off as well. But the difference, I think, with it was, if you notice where Clifford was receiving the ball, that Fitzsimons was kind of sending them into places where he couldn't do the same level of damage. And that's why Clifford's taking on shots. He wasn't taking on shots in front of the post. He didn't get any shots from play in front of the post. That I think Fitzsimons just shepherded him out as well. And also the bit that's kind of going under the radar here a little bit, like Dublin always had the +1 in front of Clifford as well. It was mostly Howard. Howard, like, his role doing that is going under the radar too. He had an absolute colossal game yesterday, not just with the sweeping, but also with the kick out straight after it. And as soon as the ball would go out of play, he'd be darting into the wing and he'd be just picking up ball every single time. But I thought that was a big factor in helping Fitzsimons too, was particularly Howard when he did it. Sometimes Gannon hopped in and did it a little bit too when Howard was out of position or something, or had to mark. And then Merchant did it from time to time too. But it was mostly Howard that was the one covering and sweeping.
Yeah, Howard was brilliant. No doubt about that. And I think he's actually even underrated for how good he actually is. But yeah, we're gonna move from talking about football now to talking about another performance, and that is a performance of a certain referee, David Goff. Now, before we go into this, I'm going to play a clip here which will sum up just what some of the opinions were of his performance.
From Slane, our referee, and his team of officials, a round of applause for his contribution to today's game. No. Our thanks is all.
Now.
Now. Right. So I
terrible.
Haven't heard that for a long time, and that wasn't like I was there. I was in the lower Hogan stand. I certainly wasn't booing him. Wasn't a particularly nice thing to see. But as Aaron said, a lot of people straight away jumping on it, like Colin Parkinson on Smaller Fish. He was saying that, imagine winning an All Ireland final and booing the referee. Look, yeah, there were some Dublin fans who were booing the ref, but there were Kerry fans booing the ref as well. Like Aaron was saying, like where he was, there was loads of Kerry fans booing the referee, and they were all at it. Like all fans were at it. I don't think it's fair to put it on one group of fans and say that it was all them. Look, were there Dublin fans booing the ref? Yes. Were there Kerry fans booing the ref? Yes. Should they be booing the ref? No.
Not at all. No, not at all. And what I will say about Dublin fans, like, you won an All-Ireland. I've had bad points in Dublin and Kerry. Dublin, you won an All-Ireland. There's no need to boo the referee.
Yeah, at that point, shut up. Like, literally just take the victory. Like, you don't... Because it's another thing as well that, like, it just is a bad taste in the mouth to boo the referee after you won an All-Ireland final. Like...
It is.
Yeah.
That's the thing in general, and I don't know why Dublin fans were doing it, but what I will say, I had a sneaky suspicion it was Kerry fans as well, and Brian Gavin actually said in the Irish Examiner, his column, his referee column, it's actually very good every week. He said it was Dublin fans booing the referee, and I was thinking, sure, it was Kerry fans, but obviously, Seamus, you were there. You said it was Kerry fans as well.
Well, I said that there were Kerry fans around me that were booing. Like in the lower Hogan, and there were Kerry fans around Aaron that he said he could see booing as well.
The only thing
you think about it, surely there was a whole group of lads up on the Hill 16 that were Kerry fans. Surely they would have been booing the ref as well. Like,
but the only thing I'll say about this, like having been in the Hill, I had to remind myself a few times that the first few times that I went to the Hill is that when you're physically in the Hill and you're surrounded by people as well, that this kind of siege mentality does start, that if a few decisions go against, and if everybody starts saying, if you're in a big cluster of fans, that of your own fans, and everybody saying, oh, the ref is robbing us here and stuff as well. I've been at plenty of games where I've come out absolutely convinced that like, oh, Dublin were given a tough time there. And then you go and you watch it back after and you think if there's a perfectly good reason why the free is given as well. And you can't see that in the thing. Croke Park has this thing that they don't play controversial moments on the screen again. So there's nothing shown to change people's minds of it. And there's nothing to say, oh, actually, that's why it happened.
But let's be honest as well, Luke, like people won't change their minds.
Yeah,
like,
but that's
you heard? So it's like some people will literally just defend their point of view until the end of time. Once they decide it's free,
like
free.
For anyone that's been in the Hill, kind of, they know how it is. That the Hill's not like, if you're going in there expecting to be hearing loads of people going in complimenting the ref, saying well done, great call, ref, like you're in the wrong place. But like it's like every time I go there, you'd hear some great ones as well and stuff, and it'd be ridiculous stuff. I was at the semi-final for Monaghan when I was in the Hill. There was a ball I think bouncing about knee height, and about half the place was shouting pick up off the ground. Like, and it's just it's kind of the way it is. And I'd nearly fear for, like, I think it was a bit silly now by the GA president to mention, because like I know it's nice to mention the referee, give respect, get respect, but like, what did he expect was going to happen? Like, just when you, like, the natural reaction, unfortunately, in Gaelic is that if people even mention a referee, people's natural indication is to boo them, even if they had the best game of all time. Like, I think it was setting David Goff up a little bit, and I doubt David Goff will be sending thank you cards to.
That's it. Like, is that? Are we surprised? I thought he had a great game.
I thought he had a great game. Yeah,
I thought he had a great game.
Yeah,
I thought he had a great game. For him, let's be honest as well, lads. For him to have the balls to turn over a free given to the golden child, David Clifford.
Yeah.
For him to have the balls to say, oh, I got that wrong, throw ball. And a yellow card for him as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest as well, that was the right call. I saw the replay. They were both at it. And Clifford did start it. Was Mick Fitz doing it to him for the whole game? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
But in that particular play, David Clifford dragged him first. Mick Fitz dragged him back. Clifford went down.
Yeah.
And then the ref has a look with his umpires. Okay, throw ball, yellow card for both of them. That took serious stones to do that, and a lot of like to give it against the golden, the golden player in David Clifford as well. Like, not a lot of referees would have had the balls to do that.
Just
Exactly.
last, lads, I just want to hop in. I'm going to have to leg it in a second here. So I'll just make the last point. But just like, just overall, I want to just say, I thought David Goff, I thought it was a really refreshing refereeing performance. I think I was kind of counting at the start because he's kind of got that trademark off the ball free anyway as well. And we were kind of saying, I wonder how long till he does his usual kind of with the pull of the jersey off the ball kind of type free. But we were kind of watching it and there was no whistle blown for the first 10 minutes. And I just thought it did feed into it. Yeah, there was like, I'm sure you'll debate it now in a minute. McCarthy probably was blessed to stay on the field a little bit. But the only thing I'll say about the McCarthy is if you watch McCarthy in every game, McCarthy nearly deliberately tries to get his yellow card, that he lays one on people until he gets the yellow card. And then as soon as he gets the yellow card, you watch his disciplinary record goes really, really good. He's done this a few times this year. He's picked up his early yellow and then he wouldn't foul again. So I think as well, that thing, he should have been, if you look at all those incidents, you put them up together, there's probably at least 4 yellow card offences in there. But as soon as after that one where he absolutely poleaxed your man and got the yellow card, he didn't really have another one after that again. He can kind of do that. And I think McCarthy said, I have a yellow card to use here and I'm going to use it. So, look, that would be my defense of David Goff on that one, is that I think that, I think that just by not giving the yellows, it's a bit of hindsight kind of analysis that McCarthy wouldn't have made that tackle if he was on a yellow and wouldn't have been sent off. So, but no, overall, I think Goff I thought he had a very good game, fed into a good spectacle.
Yeah, very good point.
Anyway,
And your last point. All right, Luke, go on. Take care. Thank you for joining us. All right. He definitely made a good point there, and it would bring into question, Matthew, should yellow card, and this is just genuinely off the top of my head, should yellow cards be kind of an accumulative thing as the season gets longer? Because we all know the players love to get one free on their opponents, and McCarthy probably does do that. Like, should you maybe look at making yellow cards accumulative so that if a player picks up 3 yellow cards in a row or 2 yellow cards in consecutive games, that they're out of the next one?
Possibly. And it would actually reduce the amount of dirty challenges, as Luke rightly said about James McCarthy there. Possibly.
Well, it would be, because imagine a player in a semi-final who's picked up a yellow in the quarter-final might be thinking, if I get one here, I'm going to miss the final.
Yeah, and there'll be that fear in the right. But what they do with the World Cup, actually, I'm not sure are you familiar with soccer at all, Seamus, but what they do is once the semi-finals are there for the World Cup, the yellow cards are wiped. Suspensions are wiped.
Yeah.
So would you be a fan of that in general? Like,
Probably
you'd have,
because it would be harsh for a player to lose out on a game based off of a yellow card in a semi-final.
But
because
what
then you could have a little scuffle where 2 players both get yellow cards, and that could be one of them missing the final.
What I will say as well, we've seen it with the GA time and time and time again over the last few years. The disciplinary record is broken, really, because if you get you're going to get a rescinded.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes. So imagine the uproar where it'll be 3 yellow cards and you're gone. They'll try and get that rescinded as well. There'll be a lot of rescissions. And the CCCC will have a load of jobs on their hands after that. And yeah, that's just the way it will go. But what I will say and that is a very good plan, by the way, on the suspension rule, I'll definitely be up for it. What I will say about David Goff, I think he had a very good game. I was quite sceptical before the game in general, because Meath have a tendency of not liking Dublin, and David Goff helped Kerry along the way against Cork after getting the All-Ireland. So I was sceptical about Goff being the referee, but I thought he made calls, good calls for Dublin, bad calls for Dublin, good and bad for Kerry. I thought he was absolutely fair throughout the game. I thought he made no call whatsoever. I thought he had an absolutely brilliant game. And what I will say to the Kerry fans that were booing off and blaming him for the decisions, I'm sure you'll bring up Buff Egan's tweet in a sec. What I will say is that game against Cork, remember that game?
Yeah.
He didn't send off Dara Moynihan. Remember that, Kerry fans. Mm-hmm. He was contributing for getting you over the line in Bargy Keefe. So what are you going to say about him now? Like, you know, so have to think about that.
This is
Yeah.
Goff's tweet. He said, David Goff, a man living and working in Dublin, should not have refed that final. He made massive calls against Kerry in the second half. And our good friend Aaron responded saying, David Goff handed you the win versus Cork on a platter. Without that, you would have been beaten by the Dubs in the quarterfinals or even Galway in the qualifiers. Should be thanking him. Well done, Aaron. Good response. Yeah, that's spot on. The best response is the truth. And David Goff did hand Kerry that game against Cork. We have not seen another penalty like that given in the rest of the championship.
Yeah.
For incidents that deserved that more than that incident did. The Niall Scully one on the same day against Kildare deserved a penalty and a black card more than that one. And what you can tell is no Kerry player was looking for that. No Kerry player turned around and went, ref, penalty, black card. They were all like, all right, yellow card, we'll take our free. And they were like, oh, penalty, what? Like, oh yeah, right decision. So to bang on like as well that, oh, we were, destroyed by the ref. No, you weren't. Decisions went against both teams. And for anybody saying, oh, the ref didn't get everything right. Yeah, he didn't. Nobody does. Nobody gets anything right. He's a human being. There's 82,300 people in that arena. There's 15 players from either team going 100 miles at each other. There's stuff happening all over the pitch. If he has a lapse in concentration for 1 second, he misses something.
Yeah.
And did he get a couple of decisions wrong? Yes, but the level of... I made this point when we were talking earlier in the year, and we said, what a year for GA referees. Like, we had one of them getting assaulted there earlier in the year, put in hospital. We had another one that was attacked at a club game. We had top referees leaving, like retiring. There's John Keenan's gone as well, the All-Ireland hurling final referee. And then David Goff, one of the most high-profile referees, getting all that abuse and getting booed by all of the crowd pretty much nearly at the end of the game. Referees are at best tolerated. And if they're not tolerated or ignored, they're actively hated. Why would you be a referee? And here's the thing that everybody seems to forget. Without them, there's no game. Without the referee, there's no sport. So it's time that everyone just starts treating these with the same respect that they deserve. Because it's ridiculous to carry on like it, particularly from Dublin fans. Because, like, look, Luke is right when he's talking about the Hill. And I've been there on Hill 16 in big games. And there is that kind of almost like group mentality of, we're Dubs. And if the game didn't go against us, well, how could we lose? And if somebody says, oh, the ref, took it off us, there is that instinct to kind of give into that and be like, oh, yeah, that's why we lost. But, so for Kerry fans, I wouldn't blame them at all if that got them on the way out and they started thinking, God, we had David Clifford, Sean O'Shea. How did we lose that game? The ref. Yeah, the ref. And that is kind of like an accepted answer for so many people in the GA, unfortunately. So for Dublin fans, it's even more embarrassing to be booing the referee after you've won the All-Ireland final. Like, you've already won. Why are you now complaining? But in my point in general is just, if we keep treating referees the way we've been treating them this season, we're going to have a serious shortage of them over the next 5 or 6 years. And rightfully so.
Exactly, yeah. And what I will say, David Goff isn't the person that had all those wides for Kerry. David Goff isn't the guy that intercepted Dublin's kick or Kerry's kickouts or whatever.
Yeah, David Goff didn't rob Gavin White. David Goff didn't kick. How many wides did Kerry kick in the second half?
Kicked did 7 misses, I think, in the second half.
Goff ain't missing them. You had the chances to win the game.
Yeah, and to be honest, Kerry, they didn't at all. And what I will say about the Cork decision as well,
and for anybody as well, here's another thing. I don't even care saying this. Like, especially for people who are on the Kerry side of it and saying, imagine being in an All-Ireland final and winning an All-Ireland and then giving out about the referee afterwards, as if that's a uniquely Dublin thing to do. Do you not remember when Fossa won the All-Ireland Junior Club Championship this year? And Paddy Clifford, during his speech, had a go
Yeah.
at the ref, saying, I don't know how I was sent off for that, during his speech. So this is not just a uniquely Dublin thing. So that angle is bollocks as well. Everyone is susceptible to it. But in my opinion, it's not acceptable either way to be having to go at the ref after the game is done.
And the thing is, he's a blight on the game in general. And actually, there's a bit of an example down here at West Cork. It actually happened, I think, it was last night. I was reporting on a game last night, and the referee was actually struggling for umpires.
There you go.
These,
No one
they-
wants to
they-
do it. You're putting
Exactly.
yourself in the line of fire.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, one of the umpires that the referee has at his disposal, he didn't actually have his own umpires. He just got some young lad for the club down one goal, one umpire. And then down the other goal, a lad with an umbrella who you didn't know if he was going for a point or if he was going wide, because it was actually, Comedy Central at stages, but this shouldn't be a point with the referee. And another example, this is a game I wasn't at. There was a bit of controversy saying that one team won a game by 11 points to 10, and a lot of people, match reporters and things like that, said 11 points to 10, and the two teams said 11 points to 10. But the referee, the scoreboard was broken. That wasn't an operation. But the referee had it down as a draw. And now this thing is going to, Congress down here in West Cork, and it's getting out of hand. And the thing is, the so-called winning team, they don't have a case for winning the game unless they videotape the game themselves. That's a messed up situation.
How do we fix it? Like, what are potential solutions to this issue? Because, like, for me, step one is one that me and you have been screaming about at this point. I put up a tweet about it as well during the Derry-Kerry game, saying that just implement the clock from the LGFA game. That's the first step. Next season, implement the countdown clock with stoppages every time a player goes down injured, stoppages every time there's a long wait for a free kick, stoppages every time that a player gets substituted. And you will eliminate, number one, a lot of the time wasting measures because you're not actually wasting any time. And number two, you take it out of the referee's hands. Like, how many times have we seen additional time, at least 6 minutes, and you're in the stadium and people are like, where did he pull 6 minutes from? Or additional time, 2 minutes, and you'll hear people thinking, how was it only 2 minutes? And you're like, okay, the game hasn't even finished and already people are moaning about the timekeeping. Yeah. And then, whereas if it's a countdown clock, you can't complain. You have your time and that's it. And that was another thing as well with the Meath-Kerry game. It was very cool because it was like Kerry in the second half at one point had 15 minutes to claw back 7 points. No, Meath had 15 minutes to claw back 7 points. And the task was clear as day. This is what you have to do. And like, that's how long you got. Now, me personally, I do a tweak on it. I would do that the hooter goes and then you have one more attack. I would do it like the rugby style where you have to actually kick the ball out of play to end the attack. And if it's longer than 2 minutes, well, then the second hooter goes and it's game over. So that it would put a bit of pressure on teams to go for it when the hooter goes. But that's step number one for me. Take the time out of the referee's hands so you can just focus on refereeing the game.
Exactly, and he has so much things to focus on while doing the time and things like that as well. And that's a very good point with the hooter and the referees and things like that. And it usually works in rugby. And that's why rugby is such a fair game in general, because there's no play acting. The players realise that, no play acting whatsoever. Get on with the game.
Yeah.
And that.
What else? Next step, because when you're looking at rugby, like rugby treat the referees with respect. You think you're giving lip to a ref? Just look at what was going on with Johnny Sexton. Like, it gives abuse to a ref and all of a sudden his World Cup is in jeopardy. It's like that type of thing that rugby refs are treated with respect. How do we implement that in the GAA? And I'm not talking for a second about club games. Club games is a whole other issue that realistically we need to do a full podcast for that. But in general, in the inter-county game, what would be the next step for you to try and protect the referee to some level? Look, you're always going to have people in the crowd booing. It's just unfortunately something that you won't be able to stop. It's like the minute the Kerry lost that game, it was so predictable that people were going to be like, oh, Clifford's a bottler, like, or O'Shea didn't turn up and all this stuff. It's sadly predictable. And as just as predictable as the referee getting abuse. But like VAR, could that be a shout? Like the replays, etc. You look at how the replays managed to solve the Shane Walsh Hawkeye incident against Derry in 2022. Like, is that something we could do?
The thing is, and actually somebody made a very good point to me about this, we need to have Hawkeye in every GA ground before implementing VAR.
Yeah.
That was just the point of view, and that's probably the right point of view. But step number one, and we mentioned this earlier on the podcast, do away with the CCC crap. Please, do away with it. Because if a player gets a red card, suspend them. Simple as that. None of these saying, oh, he missed the All-Ireland final, oh, what a shame for him, he's such a talented player, he missed his final, and this is the best game of his career.
Oh, no, he only broke your man's jaw. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. That is the thing with a chance.
This year, like when Rian O'Neill got sent off for basically kneeling on Monroe's head for about 2 minutes, and then people are like, "Oh, but Rian O'Neill's so good. He needs to play for him, man." Like that's basically the logic.
Oh my God, it's just embarrassing at this stage, Seamus. The excuse.
Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not just using Armagh to be like, look, Dublin benefit from this wrongly in the past. Like, Dermot Connolly's out here punching people in games back in 2015, 2016, and then just getting the red card overturned.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. I think was it Sean Kelly that got his red card rescinded against Derry for the Armagh game? That was another one.
Oh, yeah. To be fair, he didn't really do anything, but at the same time, I think he just sent both captains off. I think that's it, wasn't he? He sent Nugent off and he sent Kelly off. Funny as well that Armagh have joint captains and he sent Aidan Nugent off instead of sending Rian O'Neill off. I don't know if there's some sort of, like, there's one player who's clearly more impactful to the team than the other one.
Yeah, no, that was a weird route, but actually, one that was actually legitimate. Remember Lee Keegan and Dermot Connolly for Dublin Mayo, I think 2015, I think it was, All-Ireland semi-final. And for the replay, both of them were able to play. Why? The both of them were scuffling on the ground, and you're like, how do you actually rescind those red cards? It's ridiculous at this stage.
But that's what I mean. It works itself to a point where then players are like, doesn't really matter if I get a red card because I'll just get away with it anyway. And like that's the problem. So there's no real issue, and then that's the danger then for our teams because I've been playing club games where, like, particularly against a team, if a team has a few players that are particularly hot-headed, and if they realize that the game is gone and that they've lost it, a red card isn't really a deterrent for a lot of players.
It isn't at all, no. But actually, one example before I leave the club game, another example actually down here in Cork. A player got a red card for, well, it was I don't know, was it accidental or whatever, but he if it was accidental or on purpose or whatever, but he pushed an umpire onto a post, and the umpire actually, got a serious head injury afterwards. The player got a red card. But then he initially got, I think it was a 5-1 ban or something like that. But apparently it was rescinded. The whole thing was rescinded because to impact on his mental health. I mean, it's really, and even in the intercounty game, like, even the fact, that's a very good point of the Rian O'Neill standing and kneeling on Cormac Monroe's head. Once I seen that on the replay, red card.
Yeah.
Like, whoever you're showing, that is a clear red card. And there was actually people during the week, and I think you said it as well, I think you were on my podcast that week, that you wouldn't be surprised if Rian O'Neill got his red card rescinded. He eventually didn't, which was a relief. There was actually, the fact there was talk of it getting rescinded.
Shows that,
like,
right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, it actually impacts on referees as well, saying that, geez, I'm not doing things right here, I may as well quit here. because my decision's being undermined by this as well.
Yeah, no, I do agree. And me personally, look, implement the Hawkeye as quick as you can, but then implement some form of video replay into All Ireland finals, especially during the big games. If we can see it on the screen, don't leave the referee hanging. If there's somebody up in the crowd that can see on the screen that, hey, you got that one wrong, tell him. Tell him in his earpiece, change that decision, and show it up on the screen then. Show it up on the screen as to why he's changing his decision. Because Kerry fans were losing their mind when he got that free overturned. But if they'd shown it on the screen, you would have clearly seen Clifford drag Fitzsimons first, and it would have calmed them down to some degree. I get that you don't show the contentious issues up on the screen. Like, for example, Louth Mead in 2010, if you'd showed the Joe Sheridan throwing the ball into the back of the net, you can basically write the stadium off. Like, there's going to be a riot now. But basically, like, that's it. And that just tends to be the way of it. And, yeah, like, so look, we've do you have any more good points on the game or the whole fiasco before we wrap this up?
One more thing on the referees in general. One thing I'd love to bring back. Remember when TG Carr had the mic thing and it did explain the referee's decision? Why did they get rid of that?
Yeah.
Like, it would actually explain, the context behind referees' decisions in that particular game. They did it for the Kerry hurling final. It was actually brilliant. Bring that back to TG Carr, please, for the club championship at least. And they would just explain referees insight to the game. I will say that. And the other general thoughts on the game, well done to Dublin. Brilliant performance. It was just embarrassing the way it ended with the David Goff stuff in general. And even like Larry McCarthy with his speech at the end, I don't know what you thought, Seamus, other than the David Goff stuff, with that off the thing. But the Derry Go games, I think it was, speaking about that was a bit, bit poor, to be honest with you, because it's Dublin. They should celebrate the win. And no, for Larry McCarthy to talk about that was poor enough, to be honest with you. But enough about the organisation. I don't think the organisation have helped us this year, to be honest with you. My opinions on the organisation and the referee situation. But in terms of the game, it was a good game, dramatic, and we got the eventual All-Ireland champions and deserved All-Ireland champions. Well done to you, well done to Aaron, well done to the whole Dublin fans community. Brilliant victory in Kerry. They'll go again next year. But the thing is, as well, Jack O'Connor, he's never done 2 in a row, and this year hasn't changed. So,
yeah, look, that's it. Dublin deserving All Ireland champions for me. All Ireland champions for 2023. There's a refresh of the scoreline: 115 to 113. It finished in Croke Park. I'm absolutely delighted, privileged to have been there. And yet, Dublin immortal now. 9 All-Irelands each for Stephen Cluxton, for Michael Fitzsimons and for James McCarthy. And since 2011, when Dublin got their hands on the All-Ireland title, they've only not won the All-Ireland in 3 years since then. 4 years. 2012, 2014, 2021, and 2022. It's a long day. It's 9 o'clock now. I'm tired. But anyway, guys, that has been the video. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. And until the next one, take care.